Fast, free delivery from the Home Depot makes your projects hassle-free. Forget something you need? Visit HomeDepot.com or the Home Depot app for free delivery on millions of products, including same-day and next-day options. Get delivery at the speed you need, only at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Order select in-stock items by 4 p.m., subject to availability.
We have been told that we are the big boys in town.
Well, he's into it. I'm talking about he is like lit.
He's about to start preaching.
Let everybody say amen.
I can get chills a little bit thinking about what these two guys can do.
Falcons Audible presented by AT&T is back, and yes, we are light one chair, but there is a reason behind it, folks. And if you've been a regular viewer over the past few years, you've known that when we get to this time of the year, shock usually departs us because Georgia is playing in a bowl, a college football playoff game.
Yeah.
So DJ Shockley's not going to be here with us this week. He is already down in New Orleans with the Georgia Bulldogs getting ready for their college football playoff matchup whenever you are taking this podcast in. So Dave Archer and myself, Derek Rackley, will be holding it down here for the Falcons Audible this week. So normally you get 3. This week you get 2. Arch,
Good luck to the dogs, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, good luck to the dogs. And DJ, if you're watching, feel free to chime in. Okay, no, we're not going to be able to get in.
We'll get a critique. We'll get a critique from Shock here at some point during the week. No
we
question.
will talk a couple things later in the show. We're gonna guess what Shock's keys to the game for this weekend might be. Me and Arch will go through that exercise. All right. Primetime matchup. Final primetime matchup of the season is done. Atlanta finishes 4-1 in primetime matchups this year. I think everybody would say, well, Atlanta just needs to play on primetime. Well, guess what? That is out of the Atlanta Falcons' control and very much in the control of the National Football League. However, 27-24 win over the Rams. Arch, good question here at the top of our rundown was, what was your instant reaction to Monday night's win?
Well, I felt like there was some validation, I guess is the word that would pop into my mind, that we've talked about it all year long. You and I and Shock have talked about it's a good football team. They kind of get in their own way sometimes, whether it's coaching or whether it's players. I think that all have been culpable in some of the games they haven't won. But it validated this was a team in the LA Rams we discussed last week on this podcast, and I tried to remind people throughout the week, and I was being told by people throughout the week, the Rams have a real chance to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so here you are playing late in the season when we keep getting told, and players, we don't ever buy into this, but we keep getting told these games don't mean anything. You're playing against the team that a lot of people like and kind of fancy to win the whole thing. Well, let's go test ourselves. Right. Let's go throw ourselves against the rock and see how we do.
Yeah.
Guess what? We broke the rock.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool, the way the guys stood up, prepared, and went in and played. And I think that's the part, I got kind of a warm feeling thinking about that. Mm-hmm. And what were your thoughts on how it went?
It seems like, I do a lot of work with Westwood One. So when I end up going and I meet up with my Westwood One colleagues on the weekend and they start asking me like, hey, how's everything been going? What you been up to? This, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing my stuff with the Falcons on the weekend. So it immediately brings up a conversation about the Falcons. And everybody that I talk with from a more national perspective, Arch, says that that's a really talented team. Like, they've got some really good players on that team. And I think everybody, not just them, but I would say in the national scope of things, would probably agree, haven't been able to put it all together, right? Talented team hasn't really been able to put the pieces together yet. So when we go to the Monday Night Football game, the thing that I wrote down as far as what my instant reaction was impressive but vintage. And what I mean by that is, Arch, at halftime, when DJ came down, we're about to do our halftime show. We're up 21-0 at the time. This was right before we went on for halftime. And I said, Shock, just so you know, this game is far from over.
Oh, no question.
This game is far from over. I said, they better be ready to compete for 30 more minutes here in the second half. And then what happens in the third quarter? All of a sudden you snap your fingers and this game turns around and it gets real tight, right? So that's what I mean. That's vintage NFL. NFL, period. But when you're playing one of the better teams in the NFL, the game is never over, especially with that type of offense. You talk about 1 or 2 drives, a special teams mistake, and all of a sudden everybody's starting to clinch a little bit because what looked like a comfortable situation at the time started to get real tight real quick. To me, that's the National Football League, because you got pros all over the place. You have guys that are prideful. And to anybody out there, it's kind of funny. We had a pre-meeting for our pregame show, and we were talking about draft positioning, right? Just so everybody knows, current players don't give a rip about the draft pick. Like, they don't ever walk into, if we lose this game, we get a better draft pick. Nobody ever talks about that, right? Like, they're all pros. Like, your job is to go win football games. So, and one last comment, I'm going to turn it back to you. One of my buddies that's our Sunday night guy for Westwood One, he texts me during the game while I'm sitting there watching the game, and he says, "Who's the team in the black tonight?" Right? And I think everybody was probably in that same category, like, where was this the entire season against that level of opponent?
Yeah, I think that it's always been there, and we've seen glimpses of it throughout. And you talked about it, how there's been, this misfunction or lack of efficiency in certain areas, but it's been there in every game. I think we've seen it in every game. It just hasn't manifested itself into finding ways to win. We went into this game having played in 8 one-score games. We'd won 3 of them. Okay, you flip 2 of those around, you're winning the division. I mean, that's how close it is. This Rams team had played at 8 one-score games. They'd won 4 of them. They'd won 1 more than us. So now as you go into week 18 or whatever it is, into the 17th game of the season this weekend, as we take on the Saints, we've played in 9 one-score games. We've won 4. The Rams have played in 9 one-score games. They've won 4. They're 11-5 and going to go to the playoffs. We're fighting to go to 8-9 and going to be out of the playoffs. That's it, going back to what you said originally. That's how close this thing is. These 2 teams going in, just do the math. Now, these 2 teams now have played, 32 games? The 2 games that played on Sunday evening or Monday night, 32 games. 18 of the 32 games have been one-score games. Yep. You have to win the majority of those to go in. And you can go look down the line. The Rams might be the aberration there, that they're sub 500 in one-score games. Go and look at Seattle and go look at these different teams that have played. You will find that the ledger, they're higher on the one-score game win total than they are the losers, and that's what this league is about. So getting back to your original point about the whole game, and it was never over until the final gun went off. I wish you and I would have been facing different directions, saying the same thing to different groups, because I said, get ready, because this is a heavyweight fight, and they got knocked down a couple times in the early part of this fight. Yep. Get ready, they're gonna come back. And people ask me all the time, and I'd be interested to hear what your thought is on this, Rack. They talk about basketball games where a team jumps out to a big start, and here comes the other team back. And same thing happens in football. We see it in the NFL a great deal. We see it in college football some as well, but not so much. It's more even in the NFL. What is it allows a team to come back? And some of the inhibitions you have early in a game, or your lack of aggressiveness, if you will, in a game, relaxes a little bit when you get down. Now you start throwing caution to the wind a little bit. You change tempo a little bit. The other team is human too. They naturally pull back a little bit, even though you say, "Oh no, we're not trying to play to lose." But you do that aggressiveness to go for it in this situation, or to throw it on that situation. You kind of say, "Nah." And a typical example might have been, and I don't know, I wasn't in the mind of Zach Robinson or Raheem Morris. You're up 14 points, and you're in the middle of the third quarter. You just had a nice drive, and it's 3rd and 2. You try to run. Tyler Algieri gets stoned for a no-gain or 1-yard loss, and you settle for a field goal. I was saying pre-snap, let's put the ball in Cousins' hands. Let Cousins trust Cousins to make a play here, get a first down. Because you score a touchdown, you probably win the football game right there. Yeah. Now, the field goal might have done it anyway, but you kind of settled. Getting back to my original point, you kind of pulled back on that aggressiveness. Yep. They weren't. They realized we got to throw caution to the wind. We got to do whatever we can. Verse makes the play, and now all of a sudden, not being a 17-point game, it's a 10-point play. It's a 7-point game, and as you talked about, everybody's booty starts to tighten up a little bit, right? And so that's the human piece to it. When you see teams storm back like that, why does that happen in your mind? Are we on the same page?
No, absolutely. Because, and the difference too is in the NFL, you're going to get with quarterbacks, and specifically in this game, a game with Matthew Stafford, where, okay, two things happen. You get behind. What is that now? That's a license to put the ball in the air. That's right. And you got the front runner for the MVP that had coming into the game, by the way, had thrown 519 passes and had just 5 interceptions. Okay? So you got a guy coming into the game with utmost confidence, arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League. And guess what? We got to put the ball through the air now because we're playing catch up. That, to me, is why in the NFL it gets really dangerous. And when I was playing, Arch, you were calling the games. We were still playing against Peyton Manning. We were playing against Tom Brady. We were playing against Brett Favre, and then it was Aaron Rodgers. And every single one of those games, if we got to the position to where we were up, I would always tell myself, this game ain't over until there's zeros on the clock. I'll never forget playing Peyton Manning one time. We were up on them when he was with the Colts, and I'm on the sidelines, and I'm telling myself, this game ain't over until there's zeros on the clock, because those guys can just make magic. Like, they can make magic. And there are still players like that in the NFL right now. I would say Matthew Stafford's in that category. I would say Patrick Mahomes is in that category. In their prime, I would say Josh Allen is in that category. There's other guys that are getting there. Drake May might be the next guy that's going to get into that category. But because they are so talented, because they have weapons, and there are some really, really talented play callers out here in the National Football League, and Sean McVay is one of them. That's why all these things stacking up, I'm just like, this game is not over. And then all of a sudden you see a blocked field goal for a touchdown, and I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
Like, you just need these one play that's just massive momentum swinging plays. And then it's like, uh-oh. Okay.
By the way, it was good for you to leave out the one guy I knew you had in your mind that you didn't mention, because we do play the Saints this weekend. You had to play against Drew Brees, and he might have been one of the best that there was about coming back if he was even down.
No doubt.
A lot of times he wasn't down, but
no doubt.
No question about it. You played against some of the greats in the game that the game was never over, no question.
So let's talk a little bit about how they were able to get this done, because we mentioned the interceptions, and how about how this defense played, Arch? Yeah. I mean, Jesse Bates, and I don't want to sit here and say it was a quiet year, but he was kind of loud his first couple of years with the Falcons, right? And not to say that this has been a quiet year for him. He's still been one of the most productive guys, but the way that that play ends up unfolding, right? Comes down close to the line of scrimmage, gives a look like they're going to all-out blitz. He ends up popping back out to the middle of the field. Then the entire time, he's just playing center field back there, and he's just reading Matthew Stafford, and he sees that football come out, and he's like, oh, that ball's getting overthrown, right? And the ball just goes right in his hands and takes it all the way back. So not only him, but then Xavier Watts with 2 in this game, right? Like, when you're playing against a quarterback that's in the front runner for the MVP race, who'd only thrown 5 picks coming into the game, and they pick him off 3 times. Like, how huge was that in this game?
Yeah, and it's ironic that you bring up Jesse Bates, because I talked about Jesse Bates last week, because I'd had a chance to visit with Jesse, and how people perceive it to be a quiet year for him. He's closing in on 100 tackles again for the 3rd consecutive season. The interception you're talking about was his 27th his career. It's his 4th he's taken back for touchdowns. The interception, too, the piece of it, and you talked about defense and how the defense played. It was the back end really did a good job of servicing some of the pressure that was applied. Mm-hmm. Thought that they did a really good job of not having to blitz him a ton, because you were concerned. You talked about some of the numbers for Stafford a week ago, and I don't care what coverage you throw at him. If you come after him, you make yourself extremely vulnerable. He's very good against that. So with the pressure in the front 4, which he had to kind of dice through on that particular play, kind of sidestepping pressure to his left, didn't quite get his feet set. Airmails it. Jesse makes the play and gets it in. But Jesse's conversation with me about Xavier Watts and how they kind of are like-minded, although they're maybe not quite from different eras, but certainly you got a veteran player and you got a young player. And how they've kind of nurtured one another, really, but how Jesse has been a leader for him. He said they're very similar in the way they think about the game. Mm-hmm. And you can see it. Watts has the ability to kind of perceive what you're doing, like he jumps the underneath route for the interception, his range to go get the other one deep in territory. Now, you got beat a couple times, but, hey, you're a young player and you're still learning, what can I get away with? What can't I get away with? What do I need to do to make sure I don't get beat on a slot fade? But his ability to kind of mirror his big brother, so to speak, and Jesse Bates, I thought those two guys played arguably their best football game together this season, and they've had some really good ones. Those are two guys that both have over 80 tackles on the year, and both of them now are 3+ interceptions, and now Xavier Watts has broken the record for rookie interceptions. So just an incredible season for the young guy from Notre Dame.
15 interceptions on the season now for the Falcons. 8 of them have come from Bates and Watts. And as you mentioned, Xavier Watts, first Falcons rookie to have 5 interceptions in a season since Deion Sanders. By the way, that's 36 years, if my math does me right.
By the way, the pressure piece of it, which is a part of this, and speeding up Stafford's thought process, I thought that happened a lot. I thought they did a really good job in the back end. They were extremely prepared. How many times did you see, Rack, where Stafford would step up, they'd line up, and all of a sudden you see Stafford start changing stuff. And then you looked over, and Caden Ellis and Divine Diablo and Jesse are changing things in the back end. The chess game in this game, I thought, was even more so than most football games. I thought the communication on both sides was impeccable, and then being able to match, because we play a lot of man coverage. We come after people a lot, but a lot of times we play match coverage in the back end, which means it's a zone start, and then they'll jump guys late in the routes. Whereas an over route, there'll be a guy waiting on him to take him man coverage. It's some of the nuances that Brick has in his system, and that Jerry Gray have in their system in the back end. I thought they were impeccable with some of that. Now, we missed some guys late in the game. There was a couple guys that doing that kind of stuff makes you vulnerable. He got a couple guys clean, and Stafford missed a couple of guys. Yep. But all that being said, I just thought it was an incredible performance by the entire defense, front to back. They sacked him 3 times. Yep. He came in, the second least sacked quarterback in the National Football League. You got him on the ground 3 times.
Brandon Dorlus, one of those to get a sack in the game, and that puts him, along with James Pierce Jr., at 8.5 sacks for the season. It's the first time that Falcons have had 2 players that have had 8.5 sacks or more since 2004. I was on that team, Patrick Kearney and Rod Coleman, the last time that happened for the Atlanta Falcons. We talked so much about James Pierce, especially recently, because he had that streak of getting sacks, but Brandon Dorlus has kind of been there all season long. And I talked about this during pregame show just because of what Cleveland did the previous week. They had moved above Atlanta, but with the 3 sacks, Falcons second in the National Football League behind only the Denver Broncos right now. Second in the National Football League. Think about that. Where this team was last year with just 31 sacks, they're now the second best team in the National Football League. That's quite an improvement.
And just 2 away from the record that was set in 97. And Travis Hall was on that team. We talk about defensive tackles. Brandon Dorlus, and we don't know at this point about Brandon's injury, and obviously it didn't look very good, and MRIs are going to be done this week, and I'm sure Raheem Morris will make an announcement. Whenever you see this, he may have made this announcement by the time you see this podcast, because we're recording this on a Wednesday on New Year's Eve, but hoping, crossing our fingers that it's a sprain or something, but it didn't look great. But Dorlus was going in that rarefied air. You mentioned your guy, Rod Coleman, 11.5 in 04, 10.5 in 05. Travis Hall, 10.5 in 97. That's kind of the realm that Dorlus was creeping into. So he just a monster year. Good to bring him up.
So, Arch, we have gone for a little over 18 minutes, and we have not mentioned Bijan Robinson's name one time. Like, how does that work, right? The type of game that
ain't right,
So let's go ahead and talk about him. As I mentioned last week and weeks before, like, you could just go down the gamut of the accomplishments that this young man has done. But I'm going to start by saying, just in this game alone, became the Falcons' all-time leader in scrimmage yards in the season. That's a 42-year record that has stood. Since 1983, William Andrews held that record. It's now held by one guy named Bijan Robinson and what he did this season. Longest run from scrimmage in Falcons history happened last Monday night, 93-yard touchdown. I don't think each and every week people truly, well, maybe they do, truly appreciate how good he is and how easy he makes things look, Arch, that are tremendously difficult. Tremendously difficult. His move to make the player miss in the hole for the 93-yard, I believe it was unreal.
Yeah.
He had 2 or 3 other runs that should have been 2 or 3 yard losses that he turned into 7-yard gains, longer gains than that. He makes things look so much. It's to me like some of the best quarterbacks that have played the game. The best quarterbacks that have played the game, in my opinion, Arch, make it look super easy when it is tremendously difficult. And that's what Bijan Robinson is doing to me.
He's brilliant. He's there. You think about geniuses in different walks of life, whether it's a scientific genius that just knows math problems. You look at that and you think, wow, I don't even understand that language, but they walk up and they solve it for you. Actors that just have this natural ability to make you laugh, like a Robin Williams, God rest his soul. Guys that just could come with stuff off the top of their head. That's what you're experiencing with Bijan Robinson. This guy is on another level from a genius standpoint in doing his job.
Like I was thinking artist, Arch.
Yeah.
It's like he's painting something miraculous
that
nobody else can do.
Completely agree with you. Yeah, you think, wow, how did that come together? Oh, that's beautiful. How did you do that?
Yes.
He does that. And just the 93-yard run like you're talking about, he's got a defender that's clean in the hole 2 yards deep in the backfield. And it's his eyes he's not even looking at this dude. He's already thinking about that second, third level because it's boom, boom, and that guy's.
He didn't even have a chance.
I don't know if you go back and it's like he goes into some kind of trance or something like that, where you ask him about how'd you make that guy miss? Was there a guy there? I didn't see him. Because his mind is working at in a different place, and his body matches physically. He matches his mind to be able to see it. I made the analogy a couple weeks ago about think about yourself if you've ever gone to a subway, whether you're in New York or wherever, or here in Atlanta with Marta, and it's rush hour and there's people spilling off the train. And you're trying to get by people to get on. Maybe you're at the airport, and you're trying to get on the plane train to get on. And you're in the B gates. I need to get to C gate, and my plane's getting ready to leave, and there's people spilling off. He making people miss to get on the train. That's who he is. It's amazing his ability to make people miss. But now you're exactly right, Rack. There's a brilliance to what he's doing. Take advantage of it, Falcon fans, because you are seeing, and I've mentioned it a number of times, whether it's on interviews on the radio here, we've talked about it on our podcast, you've mentioned it as well, Rack. You're seeing one of the one of the great football players of his time weaving his magic, and he's on your team. And yes, we want to get him into the playoffs, and we'd like to see him on the grandest stage in the Super Bowl. And hopefully we can do that here in the next year or so. But you're witnessing one of the great players in NFL history. The only player I can think of that even that Bijan is creeping into, I've mentioned to him before, the best running back I've ever seen in my life was Walter Payton. And that's because he could do everything. That's what this guy is. He can do everything. We talk about him catching the football, making people miss, speed, power, run through guys. Watch him pick up blitzes in this game. They came with pressures. Bijan Robinson steps up. He's your number one back. He's the leader in yards from scrimmage in the National Football League. He's shortening guys' necks that are coming on blitzes to protect his quarterback. That's what Walter Payton was. Go back and throw Sweetness's film on. That's who this guy is. And it's just, I get chills sitting down your back. You and I we kind of get giggly and goofy talking about this guy. And then you throw in the fact that he's one of the best human beings I've ever met. Yeah. I get a chance to be around him probably more than I should, but he is such a gracious, team-oriented dude. Enjoy it, Atlanta. You got one of the greats.
Listen, I said this to myself. I think I might have said it to the guys that were in the control room when I was doing the game on Monday night, and I said, this guy better get a new contract like pronto, because guess what? 31 other NFL teams are going to be in line.
No, he ain't getting out of here.
I'm telling you right now. Like, every single team in the National Football League is ready to open up their checkbook.
I saw Mr. Blank out here, big truck. He was backing it up himself, you know?
The big truck, meaning the money truck, the Brinks truck.
That's exactly right. He ain't getting out of here.
Listen, you said it eloquently, Arch. You can't find a better package, in my opinion. You can't find what he does, or shall I say what he can't do, combined with the person that he is. You just can't find him. And I think everybody is now understanding why the Falcons drafted him in the first round the year after they had a 1,000-yard rusher, because they saw all of that. They sat down with him as a person, and they saw who he was off the field, and they saw the magic that he could make on the field. And guys, he's doing more in the NFL than he did in college, because I called a couple of his games in college, and he was pretty darn good in college.
He was really good in
didn't do
college.
any of that stuff that he's doing with the Atlanta Falcons.
I wonder if
at
Steve
Texas.
Sarkisian is sitting there going, damn.
What did I miss?
Why did I give it to the other guy?
And you mentioned Walter Payton. Listen, I mean, the other accomplishment that he ended up getting on Monday night is he now has the most scrimmage yards by a player under the age of 24 in NFL history. The two guys that he passed on Monday night, Barry Sanders. You get in the conversation with Barry Sanders, I don't care what it is. That's
We just
pretty
mentioned
impressive.
Walter Payton and Barry Sanders, and you're going to mention another guy that's
And
probably a Hall of
Christian
Famer as well.
McCaffrey.
There
And
you
he's
go.
still playing.
Yeah.
And he is the closest thing to Bijan Robinson right now as far as what he can do, or to your point, Arch, what he cannot do. And now Bijan Robinson sits atop that list. How many other lists is he going to sit atop before it's all said and done?
It's like when you go to your refrigerator, you know there's milk in the refrigerator.
Should be.
Okay. Well, maybe in the Rackley. Rackley's responsible for that. If he's not having it. But no, it's one of those deals where you expect, okay, when I go to the utensil drawer, there's going to be a knife in there. There's going to be a fork in there, right?
Yeah.
That's who this guy is. When you come to the game, this is his 50th career game. He now has 27 games of 100-plus yards from scrimmage. That's like going to the utensil drawer and saying, yeah, I know where the knives are. When I bring Bijan Robinson to the game, I know I'm getting 100 yards in some capacity out of the guy. So I know we sprinkled a lot of sugar on that, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed that, because he's all of that in a bag of donuts, I'm telling you.
5 games this year alone with 175 scrimmage yards. That's 3 more than any other player in the league this year. 3 more games than any other player with 175 yards or more scrimmage yards. So that kind of sums up 27-24, big-time win for the Falcons over one of the best teams in the National Football League on Monday night in Week 17. So let's turn the page and talk about Week 18, Arch, because unfortunately there are 14 teams that make it to the postseason. There are 18 teams that are frustrated. Either they just missed out, either they had a disaster of a season, or somewhere in between. But regardless, they have fell short of their goal, which is to get into the postseason tournament, to give yourself a chance, and then you never know what's going to happen. Now, neither of these teams, the Atlanta Falcons or the New Orleans Saints, are going to be in, but oddly enough, this game has implications to who does get into the NFC South, which is wild to think about when Atlanta was eliminated from postseason contention. But now that they have gotten on this winning streak, now it's not really going to matter because the game is going to be between Carolina and Tampa is going to be completed. However, if Carolina loses that game and Atlanta wins, Carolina still goes because of some weird tiebreakers that end up. So the Atlanta's game still has some postseason ramifications, which is a little wild. But even more wild, Arch, is you think back and you're like, one victory over Carolina.
Yeah.
Just get one victory over Carolina. And now look at the different situation that we would be in right now.
Yeah, if you beat Carolina, you lost to them in overtime here. Remember, it's a 30-27 loss. You can throw away Week 3 because that was kind of a disaster football game. But yeah, in the second game here in Atlanta, you lose 30-27. You could even, and I know the fan out there, and there's a lot of sports talk here in town that are not necessarily looking at the things that we just talked about with Bijan Robinson and all that kind of stuff. There may be more angst about the fact that you did have a couple of games on the hook that you could have won. I mean, pick one. Even let's say you lose to Carolina twice. Pick another game out. The Colts. Pick out the Patriots game. The Jets game. Yep. I mean, you could go through a list of games that if you got one of them, now all of a sudden you win this weekend, there's a chance you go ahead and win the division anyway, even with the law. And think about it on the other side, too. We're going to talk about the Saints. Saints are on a 4-game winning streak now. Tyler Shuck, their quarterback, has slid in, the young quarterback out of Louisville. Young, I say he's a little bit like Penix, played a lot of college football, but now is playing at a high level, and they've won 4 straight. He's playing at a pretty good level, and they beat Carolina. They beat Tampa. If they win this game against Atlanta, they finish second in the division. They're going to slide into that spot too. So they're playing for a great deal from a pride standpoint too. So here's a classic. I don't know if you were in these as Saint games, but I played in a lot of these games where we were eliminated from playoff contention, but it was the Saints late in the year. Mm-hmm. These end up being rock fights between these two teams because they don't like each other. This is truly Bears, Packers, you can pick one out, maybe Ravens, Steelers. There's a couple of rivalries in the league that kind of go outside the realm of National Football League stuff. And we're both in the South, came into the league 1 year apart from one another. Atlanta came in first, and then New Orleans came in the next year. You kind of got shoved in the NFC West. You were, and so there's been kind of that little brother, big brother, or we deserve this and you guys don't. And so there's a lot of pettiness going on between the two. So there's a lot on the line for this, even though you don't have any playoff stuff.
Well, just think about it, kind of to support the point that I made earlier about players and coaches don't really care about draft positioning. Go back 4 weeks ago. The New Orleans Saints at the time were 2-10. Don't you think if there was a care about whether or not you wanted to get the highest draft pick possible, that would have been the time for the Saints to quote-unquote tank their season and have an opportunity to get the 1 or 2 or 3 overall pick? Well, what have they done? They've won 4 straight games, and they've done it with arguably their most dynamic player not being in the lineup, and Alvin Kamara. And don't know what his status is going to be against the Falcons this weekend, but they're now 6-10, as you mentioned, Arch. And 4 straight wins. Tyler Shuck has been over 300 yards passing each of the last 2 games, 333 yards and a couple of touchdowns last week, and not even having Kamara in the game, and they're still finding ways to win football games. So, Arch, I'm going to ask you this. What can Atlanta kind of go back to the first matchup and harness and have a better start to finish? Because I think that's probably been one of the biggest issues for Atlanta this year is start to finish solid performance. From the opening kick to finishing the game hasn't quite always been there. What can Atlanta take from that first game, Arch, and improve on to put a better performance out there this Sunday at home?
Well, I think that you continue to want to take away the two-way go. We talked about the Rams, and can you take away Stafford's two-way go? I think you did that early in the game where you took Kyron Williams and Blake Corum to a certain extent out of the game, where they weren't able to run the football and they had to lean kind of on their passing game, and so you built that 21-point lead. I think that in this game, if you can kind of take that away. Now, Shuck has been really good, as Rack has said. He's completing over this 4-game stretch of wins, 4 consecutive wins. That's over Tampa, Carolina. 2 teams are going to play for the division, the Jets and Tennessee. He's completed 72% of his passes and averaging about 260 yards per game through the air. He's only thrown 1 interception, I think, in those 2 games. Correct. Those 4 games. He's got 4 touchdowns. He's run for a touchdown, and that might be the piece to it as well. In the 3 games, he's run the ball 21 times. This is something he did in college. He was at Oregon. He went to Texas Tech. Got kind of injured in both places, more at Texas Tech than maybe at Oregon, as he started as a young guy at Oregon, and then went to Louisville and had a really good final year at Louisville. His ability to run with the football is kind of masked a little bit because he's a big dude, 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds, but he's run for over 100 yards in the last 4 games, so that'll be something that we'll have to kind of corral. He had 7 carries for 22 yards against Atlanta in that first game. That was just his 3rd start of his career. This guy has blossomed a great deal over the last 8 games since he started. So I would think, okay, let's make them – don't give up the big play, which, again, that's plagued Atlanta's defense a little bit, Rack. Mm-hmm. You're doing such a good job, and then the explosives. Now, the Rams, that's who they are, but they had 10 plays of 15 yards or more in the game. Yeah. That's something you can't give up to New Orleans. Don't help them out. Shuck threw the ball 43 times in the game against Atlanta for 243 yards. So when you factor that out, if you do the math real quick, that's like 6 yards an attempt. Mm-hmm. That's where you'd like to kind of keep him. If you let him get into that 7-8 yards an attempt, now all of a sudden you're having some problems and they're making some plays against you. So that's kind of what I would lean into there. What are your thoughts on how you kind of keep New Orleans from staying on this train they're on? Back-to-back
challenges for the defensive backfield. After the game against the Rams, Raheem Morris ends up giving A.J. Terrell a game ball because of his performance, most notably against Puka Nacua throughout the course of the game. And Puka Nacua had his second worst yardage performance of his season this year, mostly due to Terrell and what this defense was able to do to him. Reason why I say that is Chris Olave is coming off two of his best performances of his season. He's got 3 100-yard games this year, and 2 of them have come the last 2 weeks. They have been force-feeding him the football. He's a guy that we've known about for a number of years, right?
Yeah, and I think he's hurt us a couple times before, if I'm not mistaken.
A couple times.
Yeah. Seems like he's banged up every time we play him, isn't
27 targets the last 2 weeks, 18 receptions. So they are force-feeding him the football. So this is how life is in the NFL, right? You get one challenge is behind you. Guess what? You better turn the page because you got Chris Olave coming into town, and I would imagine it's going to be a similar story for them, especially if we don't see an Alvin Kamara in this game because of his versatility. So rise to the challenge there. Find a way to get takeaways. Last game, Shuck did not throw a touchdown pass, so he had 1 interception. Xavier Watts ended up picking him off that game, right? So we saw 3 last game. Are they able to do that again? So those are some of the things that come to mind. We mentioned the one most consistent force. We talked about him a lot, Bijan Robinson. Like, what has he got up his sleeve? You know, the last week of the season, like, what is he going to show us this week that's different than every other week? I don't know, but it's a surprise and it's a pleasant one every single week that we see him on the field.
Yeah, and they're going to throw the tape on, and they're going to see Bijan Robinson making plays on him in that game in mid-season, too. So Bijan had a pretty good game against New Orleans. Now, a couple of numbers for you real quickly. I don't want to get lost in the menagerie of numbers, but this Saint team has been really pretty good against the pass. They're only giving up 180 yards through the air. They've been one of the best teams in the league on third down. Teams are converting at just 34% on third down, which is third best in the National Football League. And they're getting the ball out. They've got 19 takeaways on the year. I think 9 interceptions, 10 forced fumble recoveries. So they've been getting some takeaways in this stretch where they've put the 4 games together. Shuck started 8 games, we mentioned. He's won 5 of his 8 games. So there's a little bit of a changing of the guard and changing of the feeling under Kellen Moore down there. They've kind of been losing the last couple seasons, and all of a sudden they got this young quarterback that they're feeling pretty good about, especially in the last 4 weeks, like you talked about. So I think they're coming in as a different football team, 1, because of the quarterback, and 2, because of the kind of the feeling that's going on. And we're kind of feeling different about ourselves as well. So just two sacks away. We need 3 sacks.
That's it.
You set the all-time record. And I know it's like icing on maybe a pile over in the corner, but it's still some stuff that you kind of begin to build on and think about for next season.
That's great that you mentioned that, because that's what I'm going to end up kind of combining here in our last comment is going to be building. First of all, you have the rivalry matchup, right? Like, there's enough to get excited for this game because of that, right? Then there's this thing about going into the offseason on a solid note, right? 3-game winning streak as it stands right now. Can you go into the offseason with this positive note, right? That you beat a rival, that you had this winning streak going into the offseason, that you might have set the all-time single-season sack record for the franchise, that Bijan Robinson's been able to do. Give this team promise. Yes, there's going to probably be some changes. There's going to be some new personnel. Whatever it ends up happening, we don't know. That's in the future. But I know this in my career, is that when you're out of the postseason, you want to send yourself into the offseason on a positive note. So let's get to some keys here. And it's just the 2 of us, but how does Atlanta do that? Get the rivalry matchup, maybe get the sack record, go into the offseason on a positive note, and ultimately beat the Saints this weekend. What's one of the big keys that goes through your mind?
Yeah, I think that the energy, Rack, that you're talking about is real. I think people say, well, it doesn't carry over from year to year. Teams are different. That potentially is a little bit more associated, I think, with college football. I think that in the NFL, because of personnel, if you've got a 53-man roster, a big turnover in the roster would be 20 players, 15 players. A lot of times you get the same core of guys coming back, and certainly this team has got a young core of players that are going to come back. So because they're a young team, and I'm going to throw this back at you.
Yeah.
How much does this team, because of 8 years of inactivity in the playoffs, counting this season, and the core of those players has not been here the 8 years. So you've got guys that have come from winning programs: Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr., Bijan Robinson, Drake London. Different guys have come from winning organizations in college and realize and have kind of been mired in this losing scenario. How much did they need to kind of learn how to win at this level? Is there anything to that, or is
100%.
that overplayed?
Yeah. Absolutely, because you could make the same argument for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, what was the difference with them? Yes, they had a really good quarterback, but what did Patrick Mahomes do and Andy Reid when they turned things around in Kansas City? Is they turned around the belief that we are winners and we're going to win every single year. Now, that's not the case this year with the Chiefs, but that's everybody's mentality. Go back to the Patriots. Like, I always joke around about this, but like, tell me who Tom Brady's – yes, he had some stints where he had Rob Gronkowski, one of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game. He had Randy Moss for a cup of coffee, okay? But his wide receiver core throughout the majority of his career was Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola. Like, he made these guys stars. Yeah. But more than that, the organization became to the point to where the expectation was winning. Like, that's all we know. That's all that's accepted here. And we have a relentless effort to do just that, right? Yeah, everybody's going to argue with me and say they had Tom Brady. You're right, they had Tom Brady. Who's to say that Atlanta Falcons don't have Bijan Robinson? He touches the football a lot. Mm-hmm. Michael Penix needs to turn into that player. But there has to be that belief that not just we're getting to the postseason, but like that's just the first step, right? Like the teams that are really good, like the Buffalo Bills now, their goal is not getting into the postseason. They've been there. They do that every year. Yeah. Their goal is to win a Super Bowl. How do you change that tenor? That's the tenor that has to be changed in this organization. And to your point, it's a collective effort of the players learning how to win, but then having such a sour taste in their mouth with defeat that they don't allow it to happen again, right? And they get themselves to where they're an 11-4 team going into Week 17 and not where they were at, right? So you're right. It's a whole lot of shifting of the brain and heart, if you will, and that's where this organization has to get to.
Yeah, the teams that play, and we just talked about one-score games here early on in the podcast, and so what allows you to win some of those games? And some of it has to do with what you're talking about. Most of these teams, the difference between the team that's going to pick first in the draft and the team that wins it, you could put those teams on the field and they could play pretty evenly with one another. It's weird how this league, the parity in the league. So what is it that gets you over the hump? It's expectation of, obviously doing the work during the week, but the expectation level you go into the game with. I expect to win. And if things go wrong, I'm going to do something collectively with my teammates, it's going to change the tenor of the game. The Rams tried to do that. They expected to win that football game the other night. They're down 21-0, and they stormed back in the game. They made some plays. We fortunately made enough plays to win the football game, but that's what it's about. But the mentality that you get, and I don't know, maybe we're barking up the wrong tree here, but to close out the season with 4 straight wins, beating your division rival in Tampa, beating your division rival with the Saints, beating a team that could have a chance to win the win the whole thing, builds a momentum when you go into the offseason because a bulk of these guys are going to come back. Yes, there's a question mark at the key position, the quarterback position. We don't know when Michael will be ready. We don't know what Kirk's plans are, what the organization's plans are for Kirk. And so we'll figure that out over the next month. But the core guys around him have done a great job. And I'll point to the game in Tampa. You're down 14 points in the fourth quarter. You come back to win the game. You're down 10 points early to a Cardinal team. I know it's going to be picking in the top 5 probably, but they had you down in their building by 10 points and were pretty much dictating the way those game was going to go. And you came back in that game won. Finding a way to win those games and not saying, oh, okay, well, we've lost we've lost 5 in a row and we're down 14 points to Tampa. It's their building. They're going to go win the division.
Yep.
That didn't happen. And so that's what Rack's talking about, that turn of mentality a little bit, that when you show up on practice day on Wednesday, that now you're preparing to expect to win, and I'm doing the work to put that together. There's a lot of mental piece to this, fans, and I know the physicality that we talked about with what Bijan Robinson brings to the table or Brandon Dorlus brings to the table is definitely a piece of the equation. But mentally going into the game thinking, I'm supposed to win this game and I'm going to do everything I can. If it goes sideways in the game somewhere, which it inevitably will, I'm going to make something happen to change that course and not say, oh, man, we're not going to get this one. And there is something to that, because you just mentioned one of the great organizations in this league, the Kansas City Chiefs, have been doing that for the last decade. Didn't happen for them this year, but, hey, that's who they are.
I like it, Arch. Like that relentless determination to win is what you're looking for in this game. And mine's kind of to a similar fashion. It was like, let's put it all together, right? Like we saw a team on Monday night that's got off to an extremely fast start, right? Got up 21 points to a team that had not happened to all season long, right? But they finished, but it looked a little clunky coming down the stretch. Mm-hmm. But that's the other thing, is finish and win a turnover margin and sacks. Can we set that new record? And can special teams be stronger? We've seen way too many issues this year on special teams, and there was a field goal that was blocked and brought back for a score this week. Can we put that all together? Can you put everything together in the final performance of the season to give everybody in this organization that glimmer of hope? Is not necessarily the right phrase, Arch, because that's like you're trying to grab onto something that was just like there was a lot of really good moments to this season, but like put it all together to where you can say 2 weeks in a row after a Rams game and after a Saints game in Week 18 to say that's 2 really good performances of a team that I feel like's got the pieces to put things together in 2026 and to make some noise. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's certainly fair. And I know the fans sitting there saying, well, wait a minute, you guys are again putting sugar on that pile in the corner. And there's certainly validity to some of that, what you're saying, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to build that mentality that goes to win. And so there's a building process that goes on. We talked about the young players and all that kind of stuff. And what Rack's talking about is exactly right. I know you don't want to hear that. You want to say, well, who do I blame because we didn't make the playoffs? Because there was a thought that this team was a playoff football team, and not taking that off the table. This team underachieved, if you will. So what do you do with the back end of the season to make sure that doesn't happen next year? Is there something you can do? And I think they're trying to do that. Now, we don't have any idea. Rack and I don't have any idea sitting here right now who's going to be calling the shots or who's going to be throwing the football or all that kind of stuff next year potentially for the team. But we have a pretty good idea that number 7 is going to be here, number 5 is going to be here. James Pierce Jr. is going to be coming off the edge. So some of the guys that you've hung your hat on this year are coming back next year, and they're trying to leave a nice taste in their mouth so they can build in the offseason.
Well, one thing that me and Arch do know is that the Falcons have a Week 18 matchup at 1 p.m. on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints.
By the way, I did have I should have bore the Grinch again. Remember, I had the Grinch. We're going to steal. Yep. We're going to steal LA's Christmas. We took Stafford's Christmas from him. But
you could have worn it again. I wouldn't have hated it because it's still holiday season, right? You can still wear the Grinch in holiday season.
I'll just throw that guy on him.
There you go. By the way, Falcons doing the thing in their throwbacks. 16-3 in their throwbacks since 2009.
Okay, I'm starting the campaign now. Red helmets, red helmets. Who's with me? That's the helmet I wore.
That would be with you there.
I got a red helmet hanging on my wall at my house. I look at it, a red helmet.
I never did. There? All I wore was black helmets, and I'm kind of jealous of that. So 16-3 in throwbacks since 2009.
Is that unbelievable?
Okay. We'll be back next week to wrap up the Saints game, and we will also do a season in review next week as the season will come to a close. But we still got one more game left for the Falcons to go out there and put a really good performance on the field. Hopefully next week, Shock will be back in town, and he'll be joining us here to recap everything. But until then, Shock, go Dogs. Good luck to Georgia in the college football playoff, and hopefully there's a couple more games after the one coming this week. So on behalf of Shock, who's not here, and Dave Archer, I'm Derek Rackley.
By the way, real quickly, Minnesota.
Yes.
Minnesota won their 9th consecutive bowl game. Is that correct?
The kind of side joke was that PJ Fleck, all he does is win bowl games.
Well, that's for sure. It's
pretty good.
Now, it was a bowl game, but they weren't on the same sideline. It might have been kind of a lesser bowl game, if you will. But hey, 9 consecutive bowl games.
They won their bowl game.
That isn't an accident.
I am proud.
We don't get a chance to rain a lot of accolades on the Golden Gophers, but here you go. Right,
well, there we go. Minnesota Golden Gophers won their bowl game. We'll see if Shock's Georgia Bulldogs can do that as well. Didn't Iowa State just play too?
Iowa State didn't go to a bowl game, and it's been a mass exodus as the coaches left. And I think we've got 2 guys on scholarship left. Iowa State's a different story. Concentrate on Minnesota.
Story for another day.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, back next week to recap everything from this 2025 season. A couple things for you to think about for the off season, and then we will take, unfortunately, a little bit of a hiatus. But until then, thanks so much for joining us this week on the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T. And every week that you have done, hopefully you've learned something and appreciate our comments and opinions, and we'll give you some more of that.